Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Big Nation podcast. I am your host, Justin Hulet, aka Big Nation, and I'm so excited to finally kick off this podcast with you guys. This podcast has been a long time in the making. Inspiration meter has finally filled up, and just to be frank, Mrs. Big Nation was like, dude, you have got to get this thing going. So here we are. Hey, this is a place for leadership, legacy, and personal development, along with general discussions around everyday life. Parenthood, being a husband, being a wife, finding your spiritual journey, all come together in one big conversation. And whether you're a leader in your career, within your family unit, or within your community, my goal is to give you practical tools and discussions, actionable insights, and hopefully a little inspiration to help you go out and lead boldly, live fully, and build a legacy that lasts. Now, since this is our very first episode, number one, I just want to take a few minutes to introduce myself, share a little bit about my journey. Currently, I'm a work, from home dad of 7 amazing kiddos. Age ranges from 1 to 14. 4 boys, 3 girls. And yes, you heard that right. 7 kids. Also 3 dogs, 2 cats, and a bird, for what it's worth. We always kind of laugh. A little side joke is we say that Hannah is the real project manager around here, and I think she would agree. But so life here is never boring for sure, and I'll tell you this: leadership skills get tested daily when you're outnumbered like that. As fun as that is, my journey did not start here. After a stint in the corporate world, after I got out of the military, I went into the corporate world, first in the franchise industry and then into sales and marketing. I was doing that for a few years and learned a lot, but it wore on my spirit a lot. And at the time, I wasn't quite sure what that was. And I'm going to get into that in a minute, but something just wasn't fulfilling me. And so I thought it was maybe excitement and adrenaline. And I'd always had a desire to become a journeyman lineman. And an opportunity presented itself. And I called my wife one day and I say, hey, I'm going to go become a journeyman lineman. I'm going to go to line school and I'm going to go do this. And while she probably won't admit this, but I think she was like, this dude's crazy, but she was so supportive. And that's what we did. I went to line school for 15 weeks, had an injury, had to get recycled and start over, but made it through, came out, got into the industry, went into the apprenticeship. And that started a whole new journey for our family. We did what the trade people, trades folks know as tramping. We tramped all over the United States, chasing big money jobs, from East Coast to West Coast. And the family traveled with me that whole time. It was wonderful. We homeschooled. It was great. The kids saw things that we only read about in books. And, during that time, we started to realize that the whole traveling thing was awesome, but it wasn't forever. At some point, we were going to have to settle down. Our family continued to grow, obviously. And I decided to go back to college. And I was doing college in the evenings and on the weekends online, while I was still working in the field. And I went back to get my business degree with a concentration on project management. And I'll get into why I did that in another episode as well. But I wanted to prepare myself for the time that I knew was inevitably going to come, where we were going to have to settle down, if you will. But with all that being said, that time in the trade, in the field, taught me so much. Going through the apprenticeship, being a journeyman lineman, lead lineman, and ultimately, general foreman. I learned a lot about leadership first and foremost, and man, you communicate with a lot of different personalities out there, similar to the military in a lot of ways. But that experience just taught me a lot of resilience, grit, and just the value of having a clear purpose. right? Now we fast forward to today, and man, I've just taken everything I've learned from, that time in the corporate world, the time in the trades, going to college, and also a lot of the freelance sort of sole proprietor type work I had done, and just channeled it into my work and took on a role, more recently as a senior PM and business developer in the power line industry, working from home full time, opening my own consulting firm. Because I'm very entrepreneurial. And as I mentioned earlier, when I left the corporate world the first time, I thought it was, thrill that I was seeking, but truthfully, my spirit was being worn down because I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I was not able to experience that or fulfill that in a corporate role. I went and got the thrill and the adrenaline rush in the power line industry, but ultimately I ended up doing a lot of self development, soul searching, and realized like, hey, dude, like you're meant to run your own business. And so here I am. I have the consulting firm, um, you know, but then something interesting this past year happened, and an opportunity to get into the financial services industry um, came along. And what was so interesting about that is there were so many synergies with what I was already doing, both in my professional role, in my business, and then also what I was going to be doing in the financial industry. And I sort of had this moment of clarity, almost like I realized what my purpose was. And that was to serve families and help educate families on financial literacy, leadership, and just generalize like life discussions that sometimes we suppress because society tells us they're not okay to talk about. And so that gets us to where we're at today. Now, why the podcast? Why did I start the Big Nation podcast? And before I go into that, I just want to take a moment and I need to explain where Big Nation came from. This is great. A really dear friend I've met recently in this financial services industry at a retreat, started off as a joke. You know, I'm a 6'2" guy, big framed, have I guess a charisma and presence about myself. I do things big. Let's just put it that way. So everywhere I go, I always get these nicknames of boss man or big guy or big Tex or whatever it is. But it was so funny because we were all talking about all of our goals, our dreams, and what we had going on. And Andres yells out, "Big Nation. Big Tex isn't big enough." And man, it just, at the time it was funny, but it kind of stuck, and the kids even start, "Big Nation, Big Nation." So I really just decided to own that and say, you know what, that really is interesting because that's what we want to do. We want to build a big nation of, you know, legacies and leaders and husbands who can talk to their spouse and wives who could talk to their spouse and people who could find their spiritual journey. And we want to do it big and we want to do it boldly. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to stick to it. And that's how the Big Nation podcast was born. I'm a firm believer that, life is about way more than just living it. It's truly about making a difference. And it's about building something bigger than yourself and leaving something behind that's bigger than what we inherited. So, with all that said, though, that here's the thing: no one hands you a blueprint on how to do that. Um, no one tells you how to be a dad or a mom or a husband, wife. No one tells you how to be a leader, how to run a business, how to build wealth. You kind of got to figure things out as you go. And if we're being honest, it's not always easy, and it's kind of hard to find your people and a community that normalizes the discussions required to sort of build the framework and foundation you need to start doing those things. Okay. And so that's where this podcast comes in. Big Nation is my way of sharing the lessons I've learned along the way, whether that's in leadership, legacy building, life. And we're going to cover a lot of ground here, from practical tips for running a business to deep dives into personal growth, self-development, and obviously we're going to get deep into some financial strategies that will ultimately change your family's futures. So what can we expect? For starters, I just want to be clear, this is definitely a work in progress for us. So one, I totally appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be in the lineup of the podcast that you're willing to listen to. Secondly, I appreciate your patience as we develop and streamline and sort of fine tune and tweak this thing to serve you guys in the best way possible. Our goal is to shoot for episodes that are 20 to 30 minutes long, just enough time to give some valuable insights, but without overwhelming you and put too much on your plate. I don't want to weigh heavy on your heart when you got a lot of stuff going on, but I definitely want to give you some nuggets. A lot of the episodes are going to be solo. It's going to be me talking through some different things. I'll share stories, tips, strategies, from own experiences that I've had. But other times, I want to bring on some co-hosts. I've got a lot of good friends, a lot of good connections in the different spaces that I'm in. I'd love to bring them in, talk about business tools, leadership challenges, financial planning strategies, etc. And then obviously the main character as well, Miss Big Nation. Hannah will probably make quite a few guest appearances because one of our favorite things to do is work on a relationship. And one thing that we've learned is that's a sticking point for a lot of people. And we are completely inspired to try to bring some of the tactics and trials and tribulations that we've already worked through to you guys and have open, candid discussions and normalize some of those things so that hopefully somebody out there can take from that, maybe go implement it or leverage it to hopefully work through their own relationship, things and become stronger in their relationships as well. She's a rock star, by the way. And then who knows, maybe some of the little nations will make it on here or there so they can kind of pick an old dad on the podcast. I'm sure that they'll enjoy that. With all that, we'll have a few recurring segments that we intend to be pretty fun and catchy. One of the ones that I'm really excited about is going to be our big action, big results segment. That's really where I plan on highlighting some real life stories of legacy building, and in our legacy spotlight as well. But the best part about this, guys, is that I don't want this to be just me and our co-host talking to you guys. I want to hear from you. Everyone's facing different challenges. We can offer different perspectives. Love to hear what you want to hear about. What challenges are you facing? What questions do you have? What topics would you love to see covered? My goal is really just to make this podcast as interactive and practical as possible for everyone. So before we wrap up today, I want to thank you guys, obviously, for tuning in to the very first episode and bear with me through this sort of lay of the land, if you will, of the Big Nation podcast. Starting this podcast has really been a dream of mine and our families for quite a while. And man, I'm just so excited to have you here at the beginning of this journey. I'm even more excited to see where we are a year from now, and how we grow. What I'd like to just request is if you found value in the introduction and if you're excited about what's to come, definitely need your help to build the community. So the first thing obviously is if you could subscribe to the podcast, that way you don't miss out on future episodes. Share it with a friend, colleague, family members who maybe are passionate about the same things you are, or maybe they're really into leadership, legacy building, or personal growth. Also for the financial strategy piece of it. And if you're feeling extra generous, I know it's only one episode, but if you want to leave a review, it's just going to help more people find the show, join the Big Nation family, and it's just, again, help the community grow. And lastly, I'd love to hear from you guys. So reach out to me on social media, through email, and let me know what topics you want me to cover, what questions you have. Remember, this podcast is for you guys. It's a dream of mine to come and serve you, and I want to do that to the best of my abilities. So absolutely reach out. Thanks again for listening to the very first episode of Big Nation. Again, your host, Justin Hulet here. Remember, your actions today shape tomorrow's legacy. So go out there, lead boldly, live fully, and make it count. I'll see you next time.